Welcome to the Substack on the Mike Graham Show. This is, of course, the after show. We've just done 2 hours of fabulous broadcasting to the nation and to the world, to all sorts of people around the great globe that we operate in. We've been talking a lot this morning as well about the digital ID U-turn made by the government last night. This was Keir Starmer's pet baby just before Labour Party conference last year. They wanted to make compulsory digital ID something that everyone would have to sign up to in order so that the government would know who was in the country, who was working illegally, who was coming in from parts overseas. And of course, it's now been completely abandoned. But the question is, has it been completely abandoned, or will there still be some form of voluntary digital ID being offered? And will there still be loads and loads of money spent by the government, millions and possibly billions of pounds, setting it all up? Our guest today is Alan Miller, who's co-founder of the Together Declaration, a man that fights for your freedoms and mine and his own as well, because, you know, this government is nothing if not authoritarian, and a bit like the last government. They like nothing more than to order us around, tell us what to do, and make us do things that we really didn't sign up for in any manifesto. Alan, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Good to have you back on the true home of common sense, which is where we are. The Together Declaration has been fighting a campaign against digital ID for a very long time, even before this government decided that they wanted to introduce it. What's your reaction to the news that it's not going to happen now?
Well, I think firstly, Mike, we have to say it's fantastic that so many people fought so hard and have really been very vigilant in doing everything from protests and campaigning, lobbying, speaking to the press, calls to action with MPs and councillors, to the cabinet, to Companies House, trying to bring in all sorts of different people like the Institute of Directors, talking to them about it, or making sure that there's a wide platform of engagement. We've put out hundreds of thousands of flyers around the country in towns and streets and cities up and down the country. So it's been remarkable. And that's really good. And it's really important that we recognize that when people fight back and stand together, we can have an enormous impact. And we keep showing that, and that's good. However, there is a big but. And the big but is that we still have a situation where one login as the overall infrastructure, one login system that uses all the digital verification is being used and pushed to get 8 million directors to sign in. That one login system is also being utilized for things like driving licenses, weddings, pensions, and they're being presented as being voluntary at the moment. But there's always an ongoing danger and risk that more and more of this is happening everywhere, that you cannot end up engaging without it. Now, what they've also said is that there will be mandatory digital ID checks for work at the end of this release and what they've put out. And the question is, how are we checking people and what does that mean? Because obviously people are concerned about things like the borders and who's working, and that's right and due as it should be. But we've got the e-visa check that we've had already. We've got passports. We've got driver's licenses. And so what we're saying at Together and the togetherdeclaration.org, on the site, we've got actions. We're saying we must have the ability to participate in society freely without digital verification or ID. We think that the one login system should be scrapped. It's very leaky. There's been whistleblowers already talking about data breaches. It's not protected. That poses a huge risk from foreign intervention, as we've seen, cyber attacks, but also domestic, and what that means for us all. There's also obviously the civil liberties question about why should we have to have a state oversee this to just participate in society. So we're saying it together. Well done, everyone. Let's take the win and recognize that they can't just boulder it through. It was never in any manifesto. It was never discussed properly. But there's a big but. So there's the one login situation. There's the question of the children being prescribed a digital ID from birth, right? So the Children Wellbeing Schools Bill, which is actually doing that. And in the name of doing good things for children, and we've seen this with the Online Safety Act, obviously, I hope that everyone, but obviously almost everyone, decent people in Britain want to make sure our children are okay, right? You'd be mad to say, no, I don't think that's good. But what happens is it ends up, like the Online Safety Act has done, is it ends up becoming a ramming rod for censorship and for infantilizing all of the adults. So in the name of protecting children, what ends up happening is we get all sorts of censorship that's outsourced to Silicon Valley. We get situations where things are pulled down both by censors or also just by an algorithm. If, for instance, like Together did, we had an event where we were talking about the assisted suicide bill, it got pulled down from YouTube.
Right.
Probably because they don't want people promoting the idea of doing suicide, like, amongst young people. And I understand that. But you see, this is the problem. We're having a democratic debate about an important piece of legislation that's going through that could mean the state can kill citizens. And everyone should discuss that, whatever their views are on it, because it's really essential and it's a difficult subject, and it gets taken down. And you see, that's because there's these concerns about harms and to children. And on it goes with technocrats who try and do simple solutions. Australia, the under 16s, should they not be able to log in? What's that going to mean? And you realize that the only way that's going to happen is if all of us have digital ID and digital verification. And then, even then, as always, if people want to get around it, they will. There'll be VPNs. There'll be fake digital IDs like they're using in New South Wales for their driver's licenses. There'll be all sorts of ways of doing things. But all the people who generally follow rules or go along with what's going on, end up having it imposed on us. So we're saying, look, it's fantastic news they're being forced to say they're not going to make it compulsory. And people have talked a lot about an ID card. But the overall infrastructure of pushing people in a direction where everything we do is subject to being verified digitally and showing your papers digitally effectively, we're saying that's not acceptable. And Together's got a digital bill of rights, and it's effectively saying that. It's saying we must be able to engage in society. We know that there are millions of older people and pensioners who can't and don't want to do it, but it's not just them, it's everybody, right, who wants to be able to just go about their daily business without having a state infrastructure that's constantly looking at us and doing that. So the concern is it's a slower boil, and these measures are still happening and the infrastructure is in place and lots of money's been spent on it. But because they've had so much of a challenge and pushback, and because they're so concerned about the local elections on the 7th of May, and looking like that's going to be another watershed moment, and that could mean the end for Keir Starmer, they're all they're panicking somewhat, like they did with the farmers just before Christmas. And in the same way, try and give a bit of a concession. It was a major thing that they recognised that they'd made. It's terrible what they were doing, and everyone had fought back, and that's great. But it's still nowhere near good enough, and it still doesn't address the issues of agriculture. Yeah. In the same way, we're facing this thing here with digital ID.
Right. Because, I mean, looking at the way that it's being reported this morning, they're saying there will still be a kind of voluntary digital ID, which isn't very clear. It's all very kind of murky. And you kind of go, well, who's going to voluntarily put their name forward so that they can be tracked or that they can be monitored with everything that they do? I mean, I had funnily enough, an encounter with one of those one-stop shops because I was trying to get into my HMRC tax account the other day, right? Yeah. And it was asking me for my government gateway number, which of course I can't remember. Then it was asking me for my password, which I can't remember because I think I set it up last year when I was doing something else. And then eventually I thought, well, I'll just change it then. So I'll change it so I can get in on a different number, and it wouldn't let me. So I now can't get into my own tax account at HMRC to look at it or to talk to anybody, to do anything. So I'm sort of screwed at this point.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many issues, obviously, with the technical side of digital ID.
Yeah.
From being in retail in the shops, they talk about it, but at least it's not the state. When you can't use your card or your credit card or whatever, people put them on their phones and everything. There's obviously glitches that happen. But to the really serious question of, even the question about what's voluntary, if it becomes so difficult that you cannot participate in things without doing it, it no longer is voluntary.
Right.
So, vaccine passports, they were voluntary. You could decide to have them on, but you couldn't go into places, they were saying, if you didn't have them. Like in Wales, they implemented them, and that was the theory behind them. They did that in New York. So yeah, you can choose to have one, but what it means is if you don't have one, you're not going to get to participate like other people. And of course, people were saying if you don't have these things, or if you don't actually have a jab, then you can't do all these other things. Maybe we should all put you in a certain place. I mean, people were saying incredible things, right, Mike? We remember. And in the same way, what does this mean for people who can't or won't or don't want to participate this way? And there's got to be an ability for all of us just to engage without this infrastructure. I mean, let's remind ourselves in case I know a lot of your viewers will probably be very in agreement with this and sympathetic and as supporters of what we're all doing on this. But some people are saying, and particularly, even though everyone's realised that the illegal migrant argument was bogus, because in Italy, France, and Germany they have digital ID, and they've still got loads of illegal migrants. What are you going to do? Like throw iPhones at them coming on the boat? I mean, it's just preposterous, and they've backed away from it. But people do think, all right, fraud, like law and order. It's like the discussion around facial recognition, which is another key part of all of this, of digital ID. The facial recognition on the streets with policing and with verification of us and how we're seen. People think, well, look, if it can stop a certain amount of criminals, that could be a good thing. And the question is, what are we doing? How are we organising ourselves? How are we agreeing on it? Who's making the decisions, and what's that, and who's benefiting from it? And what we've got a situation with the previous government and with this one where there's a kind of gap between us and the public, and the public is perceived as being all a problem that needs to be regulated, spied on, looked at, censored. You can't really allow the flourishing of ideas and debate. Everyone's a potential problem. And the way to deal with things is not to really, and then we've seen this with protests as well, not to uphold the laws we've got, but make sure we do them with authority and really implement them and hold the line, but to make ever more new bits of legislation and law that encroaches us all more, you law-abiding people, and because they're scared or have not got the ability to implement or deal with what we've currently got in terms of law. So we've got ever-increasing legislation, ever-increasing state, ever-increasing limits on us. And so I think there's big concerns around all of this, and at Together, the Together Association, we're continuing to campaign on all these areas, making sure children don't have to have a de facto ID card from birth, making sure that we get proper answers when one login, and everyone's got the ability not to use that as directors. Because obviously, if you get 8 million directors, then they'll say to the staff, if everyone's in, and all of a sudden everyone's in, and so and across the board with this, we're saying we must make sure that we have the ability just to participate fully and freely. And we've seen all sorts of things, Mike, haven't we? Like the debanking question, where banks can do that. We've seen the Department of Work and Pensions be able now to go into people's bank accounts. And, we've got civil servants that are unelected and unaccountable. And we've got all these issues we've seen around. They're saying they're stopping non-crime hate incidents, but we know at Hendon Police Training College, people have been indoctrinated in these ideologies, and now policing's done on this basis. And if you say things on social media, you get in trouble. All of this has been a huge concern for the British public, and all of it is underpinned by this question of digital scrutiny, what you're saying, where you're spending, where you're going. And there's been a big push around all of these things, like with low traffic neighborhoods, where are you driving, fining you shouldn't do this here, on spurious ideas of supposedly net zero and supposedly clean air. And I think with all of this, we need a proper reality check and a reckoning, and say, what is it that the British public really needs? The British public want law and order. They want police without fear or favour. We want a thriving economy. We want protection at the borders. We want to make sure that we are able to freely engage with one another, speak freely. We want privacy for our families and ourselves. These are basic tenets, right, of a free society. And yet we've got these technocrats and ideologues that want to impose all these controls and limits and measures, along with some crazy ideological ideas, right? And that is something that the British public don't want. So the Labour Party and Keir Starmer Spads recognise this. I'd encourage everyone to go out and vote on the 7th of May to make your voices heard for people who are really saying that they're going to stand to dispense with digital ID, dispense with net zero, be free. But beyond that, this issue is something that we're going to have to be very vigilant about, because there's going to be a situation where the more this infrastructure gets put in place, the more the attraction of just going along with it becomes very real.
Yes. Well, also the thing that I think a lot of people find quite disturbing about this Labour government is that they like to do this. They seem to enjoy controlling what it is that they see in front of them. We've got the latest conversation going on about whether social media should be banned to under 16s. Some people have got a legitimate reason why they think that should happen. But by the same token, we've now got Starmer and Ofcom looking at X to see whether they should ban it. completely from this country, which I find to be incredibly overbearing and ridiculously kind of draconian over something which might be a problem initially, but as somebody said to me, if people start making threatening phone calls, you don't ban the telephone. You basically look after the people who are making the threatening phone calls and you deal with it. But they do seem to have a kind of a thirst for the control of the population, and they'd rather you didn't say things they don't agree with. They'd rather you didn't do things that they think are a bit unsavoury. They don't want you to go hunting, for example, because they think it's not very nice. They don't want you to, drive a petrol car because it's not clean for the environment. These are zealots, aren't they? These are people who want to make your lifestyle different because they think they know better than we do.
Absolutely. I mean, it's got to be said, Elon Musk has absolutely transformed the public debate. He's created a situation where a public square is allowable, where we have, I mean, it shouldn't be that it should ever be allowable, but we have a public square in the digital arena via X that he's put at great cost and expense with all sorts of slurs and challenges to him, but where people can thrash out ideas. And of course, when you do that, there are going to be all sorts of ideas there, and some are going to be found, people will find reprehensible. And guess what? We're all grown up and we have to deal with ideas we don't like, which is very different to actually giving people instructions or direct incitement. And where this government in Britain, I mean, we've become notorious around the world for the amount of people that we've imprisoned in this and previous ones around non-crime hate incidents and things we've said, people have said in social media. It's scandalous that Britain, the home of so much of freedom, of the idea of people who fought and died for, from the whole Reformation and all the questions around that and the Enlightenment, the ideas that is so sacrosanct that we'd be able to interpret things ourselves and have conscience and privacy. That in this land of that we've seen this go so badly dystopian, if we're really honest. And Elon Musk has done a great job in being able to open up that public square. And this attack by Keir Starmer and the Labour government, who are petrified of free debate and discussion, they're petrified of the demos. They like to think of it almost like it's a mob of the great unwashed. It's so terrible that Labour's gone so far from at one point being this, at least ideally, the idea that they represent Labour and ordinary people, to now having such contempt for everyday people. And their fear is then weaponized into like, well, let's shut this down, let's say that this is the problem. And you can see that that would have been the answer to the grooming gangs discussion. It was for a long time, don't say anything, it's racist, it's no good. And on the riots discussion and what happened in Southport and the deaths of those beautiful young girls and the way that was handled and presented, they'd much rather shut everything down, imprison people, silence people, than thrash these questions out. So I think it's really a big moment for us that the British public should be very vocal about not allowing the banning of Grok or X. I mean, obviously, Elon Musk has to deal with these things with the Digital Services Act in Europe as well as the Online Safety Act. But that's why we think the Online Safety Act should be repealed, because it ends up being not fit for purpose. And we must retain, if we don't have the freedom of speech and expression in Britain, then all these other freedoms we talk about, they go away.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so in terms of the way that Together we'll look at what goes on now from now until, say, that election in May, what are you sort of telling people to look out for in terms of, how this kind of rolls itself out, if you like?
Yeah, so we're still being, we're very, very clear about a number of these key areas that on the Children Wellbeing Schools Bill. In fact, there's a protest this Saturday that's going to be happening in London. We'll be supporting that. We've got an open letter for people. Your viewers can see it at togetherdeclaration.org saying we don't want our children to be used like this and cattle for digital ID. We want to warn again, and we've worked with a lot of veterans, that they're being used as guinea pigs, being sort of like nudged into getting these ID cards. We're saying absolutely categorically, one login forcing digital ID onto directors, company directors, saying you should go this way. They do not have to do that. There are ways around it. We've got a toolkit at Together, so we were advising people about how they should do that. There are going to be more rallies. We're doing more work up and down the country. We've got events coming up. We've got our next one in February the 12th in Wales. We've got one in Scotland. We have plans for a big rally in April before the local elections. And we're going to be campaigning in all the constituencies and encouraging people to hold everyone accountable and state categorically where they stand on these issues, where you stand on making sure that everyone can participate without digital ID, where you stand on net zero, where you stand on free speech, all these crucial issues that are really important to people. So we're going to continue, and we're not going to, because you think about it, Mike, when we managed to stop the jab mandates, or when we managed to also say, right, no more vaccine passports, and we got those wins done, if everyone just packed up, wrapped up and went, and there was a big temptation to do that, I can tell you, because this is not like the commercial world. It doesn't pay like that.
No.
But there was a bigger, you kind of think, okay, we did that. They went mad for a minute, and they should have done Brexit. They did that, but we won this, and now we get on. But you see, what happens is they then implement and go, and the next government, implement on steroids all the measures around net zero, and then here we are fighting digital ID all over again, right? And so we're not going anywhere now. We have a really strong membership base. We'd love any more of your viewers and listeners who are around to join us, togetherdeclaration.org, because the fight around digital ID, and we've done a lot of stunts and events. We did the campaign outside Labour Party conference that unites us, but also like we've done with farmers, we've seen it with hospitality and the decent people of Britain up and down the country. We're saying we need to have our own ability to hold everyone accountable. We need to be strong. We need to be able to make sure that when people say things, when Boris Johnson said, I'd eat my ID card if I was ever given one, and then he implements it, he announces we're going to have COVID passes, you go, well, look, no matter what people say, we're going to need to have something that keeps everyone accountable and everyone honest. And the best way that we can make sure that what we want to see happens is that we've got a strong public, a strong demos, strong citizens. And that's what we're going to continue to do it together.
Brilliant. Well, you're doing a fantastic job, Alan. Thank you very much indeed for everything that you do. And I'm sure there'll be people watching this who will sign up and join in and come and join your demos and your protests around the country as well. And we'll keep an eye on these people because they can't be trusted as far as you can throw them, that's for sure. Alan Miller from the Together Declaration, thank you so much. Great to see you.
Thank you, Mike.
And we'll see you soon. Thank you very much indeed. That was Alan Miller from the Together Declaration. That was another amazing Substack interview. This is, of course, the after show every single day after 9 o'clock once we finish the main show from 7 till 9. We'll have another fascinating interview tomorrow, same time on Substack. And, of course, as I always say, despite the fact there's an awful lot of it about out there, do not be a plank.
Remember, despite all of the others out there, it's always the others. Don't be a plank.